In a world filled with information, where do you turn to get straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Lock it in to the longest running financial talk show in Arkansas, and let us help you build the bridge between information and application. Real financial change begins right here, and it starts with you.
It's showtime! Woo!
It's a new year, but it is also the time of year when the post-holiday blues can really set in. Did you overspend? Did you maybe even go into debt? Overcoming a holiday hangover. That's the subject on today's Get Ready for the Future show.
This is the Get Ready for the Future show.
And we welcome you in on this January day. My name is Scott Inman, along with Janet Walker and John Shrewsbury. Settle in for the next hour. Straight talk about your finances, your retirement, your financial future. And there is a lot going on in our world, guys. There's no question about that with the Electoral College as we sit here and record this on January 6th of 2021 now, and also the Georgia Senate races. But we're going to stay microscopic today. We're handling only your personal finances today and talking about what happens after the holidays. And I think we've all experienced this through our lifetimes on some level, right? I mean, you overspent. You put too much on the credit card in November and December, and now here comes the statement, the bill is due in January. I don't like January much anyway. It's my least favorite month of the year, but you add all that financial trouble and financial woes to it, and it just stinks really sometimes.
It does, and you've got to think, okay, we're not going to persist in this situation. We got to get ourselves out of this situation, right. Maybe unlike what's going on with the federal budget these days.
That's true.
But I think that now is as good a time as any to really, Scott, I think just take stock of everything financial. And, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about what the holidays have done to us, but I think it's a good time to really just be very introspective as far as you and your finances are concerned and ask yourself a lot of questions. What am I going to do as far as this holiday hangover thing is concerned? What am I going to do about more long-term things like retirement and things of that nature? January is about new beginnings, and I think that's where we want to focus on today is how do you create a new beginning to get rid of that holiday hangover.
Yeah, and as we go through the show, we'll talk a little bit about even being prepared for next Christmas so that you don't, a year down the road, have another holiday hangover that you're dealing with at that point.
So I do want to say before we dive in too far, you talk about new beginnings. It was this time 14 years ago that John and Janet, you started a new beginning. The Get Ready for the Future show is celebrating its 14th birthday. And if you're watching us online, take a look at that. Y'all got cupcakes. I didn't.
If you're not watching us online, if you're listening on Saturday, you just need to go find us on Facebook and check out what Abby just brought in.
She didn't forget me.
That is a heart attack on top of that cupcake.
I'm not going to take a bite on camera because those little things are going to go everywhere. But when we come back after the break, that might be a possibility.
Yeah. Scott, I have to say that Janet found a audio clip of the first Get Ready for the Future show.
Yeah.
Back, I don't know, you were cleaning out some stuff or something.
Yeah, I was going through some files. We were changing how we save our files, and in doing that, there was a little bit of a cleanup to be done after this many years of electronic files, and so I ran across the very first, like 15 or 20 second segment of the show.
Yeah, and let me just say, it sucked. It was terrible.
I would agree.
It was bad. We were scared to death. We had jumped off into doing radio and not at a free, it was not free. So we were spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
14 years ago, it was a huge amount of money for us to spend to be on the radio, but I wouldn't have changed anything about what we did.
I wouldn't either, and we hadn't planned on talking about this, but I'll divert for a moment. I think it's worth it for the entrepreneurs who are listening to us out there. That radio show was a complete leap of faith for us because it cost more we had committed to a year contract and it cost more than what we could fathom at the time. But we believed that we needed to do it. And what happened on that very first show we had a prospect who contacted us as a result of that show, and that one prospect was enough to pay for the full year. And we were like, that's very confirming that this is where we're supposed to be. And here we are 14 years later, and really the radio show has been a good conduit for us to reach so many Arkansans and help you guys just get ready for the future.
And now people all across the state of Arkansas are listening to us on terrestrial radio, but now we have got the opportunity to talk to people literally all around the world to talk about their finances. And hopefully, Scott, what we've been able to do in these 14 years is make a difference. I think that's the key, is that hopefully people have heard something on this show that has ultimately made a big difference in their finances and in their life, and that's why we do it.
So I would say to the entrepreneurs out there, maybe you've got a big, scary idea. If you're passionate about it, jump in.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
No, nobody did anything by being very, very, very careful.
That's right.
They did it by taking risks.
Well, I can't tell you how many people have come up to me in the almost 5 years that I've been here and talked about how they listen to the show either every Saturday or occasionally. It has become what I have coined the go to Home Depot radio show.
Yes.
People are out doing the errands and going to do things on Saturday morning, and they listen. And people from all walks of life, I might add. And I think it's important what John said, that it is making a difference. A lot of people listen and don't ever become clients, and that's okay if they're gaining something. But we would certainly love to make you a client if you would like as well. So we're talking about, which, by the way, when I said that, it was hard to believe I've been here almost 5 years.
Yeah, you're coming up
February
on your
1.
own. Yeah.
I've been on the show almost 5 years.
Okay, we're all getting old here, so let's move on.
That's true. So the holiday hangover, right? Did you spend too much? Did you maybe even go into debt? Did you spend more than you can even pay back in 1 month? Well, statistics say lots of us did. In 2019, holiday retail sales in the U.S. surpassed the $1 trillion mark. Yes, 12 zeros. U.S. household spending an average of $1,536 during the season. So to put that in a little bit of perspective, $1 trillion, 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years.
So if you spent $1 for 32,000 years every second per second,
jeez,
that's
that's a little bit mind-boggling.
I'm sorry. That also puts into perspective what they're doing and in Congress these days of just let's spend another $1 trillion. Okay, what the heck?
So let's talk about this as far as the stats on budgeting and not budgeting and all of that. So again, we obviously don't have the information yet for 2020, but going back to 2019. 56.3% of Americans who bought gifts set a budget in advance for holiday spending. But, you ready? Of those 56.3% who set a budget, only 64% of them actually stuck to it. So that means the vast majority of people either didn't have one or decided that the budget didn't matter.
And what's more on this is that 20% of people surveyed opened some form of credit card. Now, that's not necessarily saying that they put all of that $1 trillion on the credit card or anything,
or had debt after, because you can use it and then pay it off, but they did open a new form of debt acquisition.
And also 21% of people surveyed went into debt over Christmas. And you got to begin to think, okay, Christmas comes around every year at the same time. It's not a surprise to anybody. So maybe planning could be something that you change in 2021. Planning for Christmas, because as long as we're still around, there's going to be a Christmas in 2021. So why not go ahead and start planning for it now? And then you maybe don't have to go into debt, and maybe that begins to break that cycle of debt that so many Americans are on right now, Scott.
Yeah, and I think it's exemplary of the overall financial situation that we're in this country, too. I mean, I think that it is highlighted or exacerbated during the holiday season, but we all tend to struggle with the temptations of overspending, the temptations of going into debt, the temptations of the buy now and worry about it later mentality. And if you take that through every month of the year, you can definitely get off track for your retirement and your financial freedom. So we're going to talk about ways to reset maybe after this holiday hangover that may have set in for you. And if they didn't, you're still going to find lots of tips in the rest of the show to get on track for your retirement. That's when the Get Ready for the Future show continues. Stay with us. We're just getting started. We're going to get a bite to eat and be back in a moment.
At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is that we value good communication. One of my favorite quotes about good communication is from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. If you ever doubt that, come to my house, listen to my 16-year-old son and my 13-year-old daughter having a conversation and see what happens, because they will walk away with completely different understandings of the conversation that has occurred. It happens every time. It's okay, they're still learning communication. But here at Gen Wealth, we believe that that's something you need to experience every time you walk in our door, that you need to feel understood, that you need to feel listened to. So you'll see a change in how we're even communicating. If you're talking about something that's very serious, very personal, you'll even hear a change in our tone of voice, because that's just how good communication is supposed to be. But it also means that we can feed back to you what you've shared with us, just so you know that we're listening. We value good communication. At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is that we value good communication. One of my favorite quotes about good communication is from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place."
Back.
We are celebrating our 14th
That is really good.
birthday
That
with
is
some
really good.
with some cupcakes in studio. And yeah, they are really good. But hard to believe. The Get Ready for the Future show, 14 years old. Today, or at least this week, first week in January is when John and Janet first went on the air. Today we're talking about, in this first week in January, the holiday hangover, getting past that mentality of maybe a defeatist attitude if you overspent over the holiday season. You know, I think there's a real temptation, too, to go, boy, I can't lick this financial stuff because I didn't do well. I think that overeating falls into this category over the holiday season too, right? I mean, you really go, man, this is just, I give up. But it's the new year, and we're going to offer some tips that you can apply to getting back on track, whether it's for retirement or it's just to get out of debt. If you put yourself in debt, or if you drained your emergency savings too, I mean, I don't think Christmas is really an emergency, or you borrowed from your retirement. Hopefully you didn't do that. But if you did anything, tapping into the piggy bank that you shouldn't have done, you've put your financial independence certainly in jeopardy. So the first thing we do is we talk about damage control and take some time and reflect. You know, what caused the overspending, and what can you do to prevent being back in this situation again in 12 months?
Scott, I think that when you are talking about really any kind of debt, you have to have what I would call a pivotal moment. You have to go, okay, something has happened and I'm going to not do this again. And I think that for a lot of people, Janet, it is the realization that if you are in debt, as the Bible says, you are servant to the lender, but you are also basically funding someone else's financial future instead of your own.
That's true. I think you do have to get to the why, like how and why did this happen? You know, is it that for whatever reason you had to buy for 10 more people than you were expecting? Okay, is that going to happen the next year as well? And so you can plan for that. Or is it, and this is not as likely in 2020 because of COVID, there wasn't as much in-person shopping as there was online shopping for many people this year. But, you know, those impulse buys, so you go in to get Aunt Susie a sweater, and then while you're looking at them, you get one for yourself too. And that's really pretty common in Christmas shopping. And you wind up with, you know, more stocking stuffers and more, whatever it is, just because you're there and you're in the store. I'll tell you, if you are out and about, you're going to spend more money than if you're staying at home. And so I think being very intentional, if that's part of what happened for you this year, then for next year to really start and very intentionally make a list. And this is what I'm going to buy, and this is all that I'm going to buy. It's the same concept as when you go to the grocery store. If you go in with your list, you're not going to buy a ton of excess, where if you go in hungry and you go in without a list, you're going to come home with a lot of things that you didn't really need.
I think you also have to ask yourself, what is it that you're trying to do
Yeah.
when you are overspending, for holidays? Are you trying to win someone's affection with stuff? That's a pretty deep
Yeah.
evaluation you've got to make there. But look, debt touches all kinds of things in your psyche and everything, and is actually driven by all kinds of things in your psyche that you may not even really realize. So I think a good mental assessment is
Yeah.
always good starting place for trying to do some damage control.
Yeah, and where did the most damage occur? I think that's a great place to delve into, too, because I think some of us have weaknesses in different categories than others. If you go to most banks or credit card websites, they'll automatically organize those expenses into categories online. I think about my credit card site where it'll tell me exactly what category that I spent on, and I'll tell you my weakness, it's eating out. It's the restaurants. That's where I can look and go, boy, you see where your priorities are, or your likes are, I guess, things you enjoy the most. And that allows you, I think it's very helpful and therapeutic in general, and if we're just talking about the holidays, to look back over that and say, this is where I have a problem overspending. And man, sometimes it's a real eye-opener on how much you spend.
Yeah, I'll take a moment and talk to the moms for just a minute, because I think this is pretty common. My kids are 17 and 14. Our daughter is the 14-year-old. And anytime this year when you asked her, what do you want for Christmas? Nothing. I don't need anything. And she really meant that. That was her legitimate, to her core, in her heart answer. Like, she wears school uniforms, so she doesn't need any clothes for school. We're not going a whole lot of places. We're real casual at church. She's good on that. So it's like, what am I going to do? I don't want to have nothing under the tree for her. And her brother is naming 72,000 things that we can get for him. And so there's a little bit of mommy guilt there. If you do, even within budget, if you do for him X amount, then it's like, I have to get her something. And I did, and she enjoyed it and appreciated it. But when you apply that to, let's say things are tighter, then maybe you just get a couple of things instead of many things, just to make your mommy heart feel better. If the kid really doesn't want anything, let's not just go, blah, here you go.
Yeah, and I think that you have to kind of understand that things will be okay.
Yeah.
Nobody, I certainly don't remember 5 years ago what I got for Christmas per se.
Or when you were 14, what your parents did or didn't do.
None of that is really long lasting.
Right.
And so I think that you've got to have that mental assessment, as I called it, about where you're going with in terms of what's driving your spending. But then I think you have to get down to the brass tacks of, okay, now I've done it. Now what do I do about it? And I think that you've got to get after it with a vengeance. You've got to go after that debt. If you've amassed some debt, and maybe it wasn't all from Christmas, maybe this is just a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, I got to have a plan. I've got to be able to run at this thing and knock it out, and then not go back there again. There are folks that are debt serial offenders. They pay it off and then they go right back and get at it again.
I'll tell you, for our family, and it wasn't Christmas debt, it was medical debt from everything that my husband had been through health-wise, and it was a six-figure amount of medical debt, and that'll change your life, and not for the better. But we went through a period of time where, and John will tell you, I love me some Coca-Cola. I'm going to have a Coke at lunch if I possibly can. But that was one of the things that we just went, you know what? We don't have to do that. We drink a whole lot of water, which is frankly healthier, but it's also cheaper. We had ramen noodles, and then we had ramen noodles. And seriously, we didn't buy soft drinks. We didn't buy, we're not coffee drinkers, but we didn't buy tea, anything like that that would be considered something you could cut out. We just didn't do those things. And we literally had, I know it's odd for somebody in my age group to say this, and for us to have done it in our 20s and 30s, we literally had rabbit ears. Like, we cut off everything else. We don't have to pay for entertainment. We can take what is free and use that and enjoy life, because paying down debt is going to help us enjoy life.
Now, let me say that you don't have to be in that kind of dire, extreme situation. You've got some debt. You need to get rid of it. Be systematic about it. Go ahead and create a debt snowball for yourself. And if you don't have the ability to do that or the understanding of how to do that, reach out to us. We will help you to actually put one of those things together and help you to basically accelerate the payment of that debt and get it paid off way faster and save a whole lot of interest in the process. And I think that's, the practical thing that you've got to look at and say, okay, how can I get this going? But I think that the other thing that you've got to have here is some accountability and the ability to actually have someone direct you, because you may not really understand exactly where you are. And I think sometimes the beginning of healing is the recognition of the truth.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I want to talk about one opportunity that you may have sitting in your bank account right now, and hopefully you haven't utilized it in some other way. But when you got your, whatever you're calling your COVID check, your stimulus check, and we've heard people call it different things, but if you got your $600 recently, then if you're in this situation that we're talking about, let's use that to help you move forward. Maybe you need to pay down debt and get over the holiday hangover with it. Maybe it's building up your emergency fund, but let's be intentional about, hey, here's $600 that is not in our ordinary cash flow. Let's use it to help us move forward.
Yeah, and I think that if you're talking about a husband and wife, that's $1,200.
Yeah, that's a good impact.
That is a huge impact on getting you down the road on debt. But I want to go back to the planning again, Scott, because I think the planning gives you a vision of where you're going, because it can be so lonely, really, to look at a stack of bills and say, well, I just got this little bit that I can throw at it. I don't really know what the end result is going to be. You've got to have a vision of where you're going and when you're going to get there. And only by planning are you really going to peel back the layers of that and really understand your situation. And so I've got to put a plug in for actually reaching out to us here at Gen Wealth and getting a plan together, and really don't just limit it to your debt. Look at your entire financial picture.
Yeah, I think, is it fair to say it puts things in black and white terms? You have very fixed numbers that you have parameters set, and that if you follow that plan and you get the outcome that we're seeking, things are going to be the way you want them. And you get to decide how you want them, right? You set that outcome, and the plan becomes your guide to get there. And it can be murky and very vague if you don't have a plan. I mean, I think that's the key. That's how we overspend. It's really just pull it out even to a larger scale of what Janet was talking about. You go into the grocery store with a list. If you don't have a list, you get more than you need, and you likely wasted money.
I remember that phase of life for me. Right out of college, I was earning an income that was significant to me, and it was the first time I had real money, and I had technically cousins, but more like the ages of nieces and nephews, and you kind of spoil them before you get your own kids, And I remember going shopping, Christmas shopping for them with this guy I was dating at the time, and we came out of a store, and he said, "Do you have any idea how much you've spent today?" And I did know, but and frankly, it was a good conversation for us to have, and I appreciated him thinking that way and being able to address that in a dating type situation. It's important to know how people are going to handle their money, but the point was, it didn't matter to me. Like, it was a big dollar amount that I was okay with, because I didn't have any other obligations. But when you get to a point where that changes, you have to adjust along the way.
I think oftentimes you've got to be sure you're chopping down the right forest.
Yeah.
You could be working, and you might be chopping the wrong forest down. You got to be sure to plan and understand where that plan is taking you and when you're going to get there.
We got to take a break. Back in a moment.
The beauty of a potter's work is that each item is unique. No piece is the same. That's what makes it art. At Gen Wealth, we believe your financial plan should be unique to you. Through our process, your money is carefully shaped around your goals and dreams. Your future, artfully crafted. Call us today or visit our website and connect with us. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the Bible says, fear not, 365 times, one for every day of the year. At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is that we do not fear. We don't fear market downturns because we know that they're going to happen. We just simply plan for those things to happen and work around them. It's one of the things that we believe very earnestly, that you should never fear what you don't understand. You simply find a way to understand it and find a way to use it to your advantage. It's one of the Gen Wealth standards.
We're back with more straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money on the Get Ready for the Future show.
John mentioned in the last segment the importance of planning and setting those parameters in place so you can seek the outcome you want, reach financial freedom, avoid the holiday hangover at Christmas of 2021. The first step towards building that plan for you is a free step to take. It costs you nothing to come in and sit down with one of our advisors. You can do that by calling 501-653-7355. Again, if you're driving, it's 501-653-7355. And if you're driving, don't write it down right now. You can go find it at our website, getreadyforthefuture.com, when you're not driving. It's there as well. That's our main number here in Bryant, but it will connect you with an advisor near you. We have offices in West Little Rock, Hot Springs, El Dorado, Northwest Louisiana, and Conway, and as well as here in Bryant. That process, again, begins with a free, about a 2-hour or so appointment. It may take a little more, it may take a little less, depending on everything that we need to talk about. But you share your hopes and dreams with us, what you want to accomplish, your outcome you are seeking, and we will then go to work on building your plan and get back together and present it to you. Also want to remind you of an upcoming webinar, our next webinar coming up on Tuesday, January 19th, with LPL Chief Market Strategist Ryan Dietrich. 6:30 is the time. You can click the link in the comments section or visit getreadyforthefuture.com/events to register. That is free. We're going to talk about Outlook 2021 in terms of the market and the economy. We've had so many questions in 2020 with the COVID pandemic, sending markets into tailspins down, then a ride back up, and now a new administration coming in later this month. What is going to happen in 2021? The LPL research team is on that, and Chief Market Strategist Ryan Dietrich will join us. You'll want to be sure to be tuned in for that from an investment perspective. But today we're talking on the Get Ready for the Future show about if you're in a holiday hangover, how do you get out of it and avoid getting into it again? And one of the things we talked about in the last segment was assessing the damage. Did you overspend? Did you go into debt? What happened? How did it happen? Then looking at trimming your budget. You know, you may not have to be as extreme as Janet was when she was trying to get out of medical debt, at least for not very long. But I do think one thing we didn't mention was consider trying a no-spend month. Just try to do it for a month.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised probably at how much you spend that's not necessary, and that would allow you to reset your budget for the upcoming year. But John talked about the planning, and I want to get back to that. Everything else in your life, like everything else in your life, a little planning can make a huge difference in the outcome of your holiday spending. And and that planning, it needs to be holistic. I think it needs to include all aspects. But, John, you mentioned the debt snowball. That's a great way to set a plan on if you went into debt over the holiday season, and setting that plan in motion to get out of debt and then avoiding it in the future.
I think if you think about the ultimate thing of being debt free and what you could do with your money if you were debt free, that's kind of the future vision that you've got to have in planning. But I think you also have to convince yourself to say, okay, what is done is done. I am here right now. What counts is not what we did, but what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is have this plan to actually reach that ultimate destination. There's a lot of psychology about that goes into play. It's not just the numbers. If it was just the numbers, Janet, this would be easy because, people can sit down with a calculator and figure this out. But there is so much psychology that is involved in getting into debt and getting out of debt.
You're absolutely right. And the overspending that occurs in the first place, to get you to that point. One of the things that I think is important and that I rarely see anybody do, even people who are pretty good budgeters and who are forward-minded financially, one of the things that I don't see people very often do is to label their savings. Like, we'll have people who have maybe $150,000 sitting in the bank, and the question is, okay, what's the purpose for these dollars? And if you go through and tell me $50,000 of it is true emergency fund to cover our 6 months of expenses, we're going to do some remodeling that takes another 50, and then we want to buy a vehicle, and that's 50. Okay, you've accounted for all 150. That's great, not a problem. But what happens instead of something like that is, it's just kind of there. So at what point have you maybe crossed a threshold that you shouldn't have crossed? It's okay to have some generic savings, but most of it needs to have a label so that you can say, hey, we've got vacation covered because it's this amount. We've got Christmas covered because it's this amount. We've got our emergency fund. Putting those labels on there allows you to have a stopping point on whatever it is. Like when we talk about vacations, Scott, you're fond of talking about, in retirement, people might choose to go to Paris, Arkansas, or they might choose to go to Paris, France. That vacation money is a very different budget line. And the same is true really for so many other categories. You've just got to decide what your line is and label your savings so you don't go over that.
And I think you have to make some hard decisions. The easy decision would be to look at how much money you're putting away for retirement in your 401k or something like that and go, all right, I'm going to just stop doing that, and I'm going to attack this debt. And there would be, maybe even be people that would advise you to do that. I think you can make decisions in other areas of your life and not affect your long-term financial future, because ultimately that's what's going to drive your financial future are those contributions to your retirement accounts and things of that nature,
right,
and the ability to get the free money match from your employer. Everybody that has an employer plan, look, you're just missing it if you don't get that match, if you're not at least doing that. Now, you might want to draw back a little bit if you just don't have any other room in your budget to address the debt. And I think that's where a financial coach or someone to come alongside you and help you to understand, okay, this is the balance that you need to have
right
here, because that third-party, disinterested, unemotional advice is incredibly valuable to you if you want to try to accomplish being debt-free and ultimately being financially independent.
Now, I want to tap into the psychology that you kind of referred to a little bit earlier in the segment, John. We mentioned earlier on today in this show about the holiday hangover can kind of put you in a funk. It's kind of this defeatist mentality that I can't do this. And I think maybe you're onto something when you say maybe that's why people don't really build the plan, because they think they don't even give much time thinking about what do they want, what does financial independence look like, because they feel defeated that they can't get there.
I remember having that conversation not about holiday spending, but about car payments with a couple that they were pretty well on track for retirement. And we were just going through and talking about cash flow, having that type of conversation. And the wife looked at me and said, well, always going to have a car payment. And I said that kind of smart alecky. It didn't quite come across in that tone when she was talking to me, but it was just, she was completely convinced that everybody, regardless of what their situation, what their details might be, that everybody was always going to have a car payment. At this point, they don't have one anymore. We've gotten through some coaching, and it's a little bit different mindset. The same thing is true of Christmas. You don't have to sit there and say in January, everybody's going to have some holiday hangover. Not necessarily. If you plan for it ahead of time, it doesn't have to be like that.
How many times, Scott, have you heard people say, I'm just going to work till I die? That is a form of that, giving up on the ability to become financially independent and saying, I'm just going to work till I die. Now, maybe that's what you want to do. A lot of people are made to work, and that's their thing in life, is that they enjoy it, and they're going to go to their grave doing the thing that they enjoy. If that's your motivation behind it, then that's okay. But if your motivation is, I just can't get there from here, I will tell you that you are selling yourself short in saying that, because I have seen people make leaps and bounds toward their goals in retirement when they didn't think they could get there from here. Well, it really all is driven by psychology.
And frankly, we've also seen people who were already at the point where they could retire, and they just didn't know it, and so their thought was, I'm going to keep working for 6 or 7 more years. Yeah. They were already there and didn't have anybody to come alongside them and say, actually, you could do it now if you want to.
And back to the plan. So one of our tips here is set your spending budget now, talking about for the holidays, for Christmas shopping and for the entire holiday season. But setting your spending budget, I think about what Janet said about itemizing, if you will, your savings. What is the purpose for each amount in your savings account? That goes back to the full-on plan. Could you even really think about, boy, if I make a retirement plan, I've actually got a spending budget for the holidays? Yes, you do. It's all part of the itemization process.
We've gotten away from a couple of tools that the retail industry and the banking industry used to use to facilitate Christmas. One of them was layaway.
Yes.
And the other was a Christmas club.
Yes.
Yeah, the banks used to have a Christmas club that they would set aside a certain amount of money every month into a savings account for you, and you couldn't withdraw it until like October or November, so you could go buy the Christmas, and you didn't have to go put it on the credit, so to speak. And layaway was much the same thing. Well, you just don't have that anymore at any retail store that I'm aware of.
That was really started, the Christmas Club stuff was started before the complete onset of credit cards.
Yes.
And so because people didn't have the option to swipe a card and pay for Christmas, sort of pay for Christmas, then they had to save in advance. What a novel concept, to be forced to save in advance for whatever it is that you're wanting to do. I'm not in favor of forcing people to do that, but if we've done it before historically, and we have because there was no other choice before credit cards, then we can do it again.
I think it's, there's been some, progress, if you will, in terms of the communication of the impact of credit cards on your statements and what have you, because if you read the statement, it will tell you how financially stupid a credit card,
if you just pay the minimum payment,
if you carry the balance or whatever the case may be. If you maintain a balance, let's say of $10,000 on a credit card, you're probably going to pay that credit card company $1,200 to $1,500 in interest for the privilege of being able to carry that $10,000. Think about what that $1,200 could do somewhere else. And by the way, think about what that monthly payment could do, because you're also paying principal on that payment, and you go out and build it back up. And it's just this cycle of financial death if you're not careful. And so, yes, you do need to outline your budget for your Christmas spending now, so you don't repeat that cycle into the future.
Yeah, I thought when we saw that 20% of Americans opened a credit card during the holiday season, that's probably those store credit cards, because they got 5% off, right?
You get a discount.
But they had to pay 22% in interest. Hey, we've got one more segment coming up on the Get Ready for the Future show. When we return, we're going to wrap things up. And don't forget, if you'd like to make an appointment with a Gen Wealth advisor, the number is 501-653-7355, or reach out with an email. Just send it to info@getreadyforthefuture.com.
Hey, it's John and Janet from Gen Wealth Financial Advisors, and we are so excited and honored to be named Arkansas Money and Politics Best of the Best in 2020 in 2 categories. One as Best Financial Advisors, but secondly, Best Women-Owned Business.
Thank you so much for your vote of confidence in us. We know it's the Gen Wealth Financial Advisors name that showed up, but we also know that we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much for your support and for your vote of appreciation for Gen Wealth.
There's always been power in standing up for what you believe in, challenging the status quo, and never accepting the ordinary. What about the rest of your life? Will you settle? Or will your retirement be more? More fun, more family than finances, more than just investments. Connect with us at Gen Wealth and harness the power of more.
Education-driven, strategy-based, team-delivered. That's how we roll on the Get Ready for the Future show, and we're back for more.
Talking about getting out of that holiday hangover if you overspent over the Christmas season, and don't let it defeat you for the entire year of 2021. We've talked about assessing the damage, working a plan to get out of debt, trim your budget, and that creates margin for you with your cash flow, and then set that spending budget for next year's Christmas. Those are a few tips that we talked about today on the Get Ready for the Future show. And as we wrap things up today in our final segment, we're going to open it up to the bigger picture, because all these things apply to Christmas spending, but it also applies to life. In the grand scheme of things, overspending a little on one holiday, one time, probably won't throw you majorly off track, especially if you are building some retirement savings. But as we kind of talked about the psychology, guys, building toward the future you want starts with the decisions that you make right now.
Yeah, you can't sacrifice what you want most for what you want now. That's very clear that you just won't ever get there if you do that. And I think that that's where a complete picture of your finances really does come into play for you when you come in and sit down with a Gen Wealth advisor and do a financial plan. Maybe it's the holiday hangover that is the catalyst of this. But I want you to think about what the possibilities are if you actually sit down and plan. Because you can not only break that cycle of debt, but you can actually begin to make some progress. And I think that is where everything begins, is being able to understand what the possibilities are and where you're going with it. And to be able to make some progress and make some tracks on your planning is good. But I also think that there is education involved in that. Guys, how many times have we seen people stop putting money into their 401k plan because we had a time like we had in March of 2020? Now, we're 9 or 10 months away from removed from that episode, but everybody was frankly just scared to death during that time, didn't know whether the financial markets would ever recover or anything. But the people who stuck with their plan went through that and did exactly what they needed to do. Only the people that were educated were able to do that, because otherwise people just, irrationally think, well, this is a bad investment. The account value keeps going down.
Right. On
a day-to-day basis, it keeps going down. And Janet, I think that education component combined with the vision of what a plan can give you really does allow for there to be change.
I think the education in that realm is important, and I'll talk about another aspect of education, and that is to get together with your family members, the people you're exchanging gifts with and everything, and get on the same page and really understand, from each other, what's important financially, because it's one thing to have a whole lot of gifts under the tree, but maybe what if you had fewer gifts under the tree but you could retire earlier? Or if you had fewer gifts under the tree but you take a really good family vacation that you don't normally do? What's more important? There's one year that we we just decided to forego gift giving on my husband's side of the family, and we all went on a family cruise. So we did zero shopping for each other that year. But that is one of the most memorable Christmases we've had ever, because we chose the experience rather than the stuff. And I think that's part of, your financial planning. Can you choose the experience of financial independence? Has that ever even crossed your mind that your decisions on the holidays impact the reality or lack thereof for you as far as financial independence is concerned?
And not just the experience of financial independence, but the experiences that financial independence will afford you to have.
Lots.
That's the key. Is everybody's into the experience these days, and I get that, and that is probably a very positive trend in our society right now. But in order to go through those experiences, it takes money, and either you're going to borrow that money or you're going to spend that money that you've earned. It is much better to spend that money and not have that experience hangover down the road as well.
When you talk about the word change, I think about everybody this year, or not everybody, but so many people talking about, I can't wait for 2020 to be over. It's been such an awful year, as if when the calendar turns to 2021, everything's going to magically get better. Change doesn't happen that way, especially in your financial lives. Change is determined by the decisions that you make differently than you did last time. Mistakes can't be undone, but they can be avoided in the future.
Scott, you're having the same conversation that I've been having with people about 2020 to 2021. Here we are a week in, and I guarantee you, unless you have made changes, your financial environment, if you will, doesn't know that it's a different year.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the only change that is going to be made from 2021 to 2020 in your own personal finances are the ones that you're intentional about. Those are the ones that you're really going to see substantive change, because look, you are in charge of your future. And I know that bad things happen to good people, and circumstances crop up, and it causes you to go into a financial tailspin. Those things are going to happen, but there are many, many things that we do to ourselves financially that get us into a pickle more so than that big event that wrecks your financial future. I've had people come in before and say, I want to be real careful and not tie up my money because I might need it at some point in time. And I always look at them and say, tell me somebody that you've ever known that needed $500,000
all at once,
all at one time, and they had to put their hands on it right then. Those are things that you've got to think about when it comes to that financial independence thing. Is what decisions are you making that are going to drive financial independence in 2021?
Yeah, I always tell people, you plan for the positive and plan for everything that could happen, and if it doesn't, that's great. If the bad things don't happen, that's great. But if you don't plan and everything happens, that's where you really get into problems. Without a plan, the future is just what happens to you.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about planning and about your mindset about planning. I think that's so critical to understand how you think and whether that maybe needs to be adjusted a little bit. So a plan, most people will think about, oh my gosh, I don't want to sit down and do planning. That sounds like spreadsheets and yuck and numbers and boring and budget and blah, blah, blah. Really, a plan is the manifestation of your excitement. Whatever it is that you're excited about, if you're excited about a trip, you're going to plan for it. If you're excited about retirement, well, you're going to plan for it. And that's what allows it to become your reality. So consider your plan to be things that it is going to allow you to do instead of what it's not going to allow you to do. Just like budgeting, it's the things that it will help you and allow you to do, not restrict you from doing.
And Scott, I think it's important for our listeners to understand that regardless of where you are in life, there's no judgment. When you come to Gen Wealth and sit down with an advisor, we've had advisors at where you are, or maybe even worse.
Yeah.
And they've come out of that, and they've learned from that experience, and they can share that experience with you. There's no judgment in that. There's really no case that we go, we just can't help you. We will help you in one way or the other get to the help that you are looking for and that you need. Maybe it's just a little tweak that needs to be done, Maybe it's a complete overhaul. Don't know until we sit down with you, but we have advisors across the state of Arkansas, Northwest Louisiana. We've got folks that are greatly experienced at all stages of life to help you wherever you are. So all you have to do is pick up the phone, give us a call at Gen Wealth, and we can help you make 2021 different than 2020. But keep in mind, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yeah. I think it's so much more. It's worth pointing out it's so much more than investments, too. I think that's where the conversation generally goes to when people come in and have an expectation of meeting with a financial advisor, that it is only about picking the right investments. Your financial freedom is not dependent on picking the right investments. It's about planning and having the right investment strategy, the overall approach to your investments and your assets. That number, if you want to reach out and set that first complimentary appointment with a Gen Wealth financial advisor, is 501-653-7355. Again, it's 501-653-7355. You can also do it by email. Just send it to info@getreadyforthefuture.com, and Anna Olive will get back with you. She is our client introductory specialist to set an appointment with an advisor that can best meet your specific needs and goals. Well, hopefully we've helped you get out of the holiday hangover today. It is coming up on time for our final thoughts. There's the bell. And Janet, I'm going to let you go first.
All right. Whether you're thinking about retirement or just thinking about the holidays, whatever it is that's on your mind right now, I would say that a little planning goes a long ways for you. So don't sacrifice what you want most for what you want now. We talked about that earlier. It's so important to have that more holistic mindset, holistic point of view on this, and set your budget early. That means start now, because if you put it off, you're going to be in the same situation a year from now as you are at this point. And then set your intentions, and this is always a big one for me. I have a shirt that says, remember your why. Now, it applies to lots of different concepts, depending on what's going on at that point. But remember your why when you're budgeting for the holidays. If you're trying to impress somebody, maybe reevaluate that a little bit.
Scott, I think I love what you said just a few minutes ago, and that is, without a plan, whatever happens to you, it just happens, and you become a victim of circumstances, if you will. Maybe circumstances that you created, maybe circumstances that somebody else created. But if you don't have a plan, then you can't be intentional about anything, because you really haven't put your intentions on paper and put them on purpose. And that is what we want to help you do here at Gen Wealth. So I think that is a huge takeaway from our show today. And I think also, if you're not planning for the smaller life events, how do you know that you're on track for the bigger ones? That's a big question, because a lot of those small adjustments really do kind of add up to the big picture that you're trying to achieve.
Well, planning starts with a good outlook of what's to come. I'll use the opportunity to plug our upcoming Outlook 2021 webinar with our guest, Ryan Dietrich. He is the Chief Market Strategist for LPL Financial. It's Tuesday, January 19th at 6:30 p.m. Register at getreadyforthefuture.com/events. We'll see you again next week.
At 501-653-7355. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.